Good evening. This is Fort Bend County Judge Bob Hebert. We have some important information about the evacuation orders affecting those districts that have and operate levees in Fort Bend County. We've made some changes, and I would like for you to pay close attention. If you don't get the information that you need, you can go to our website at fbcoem.org and click on evacuation orders. The interactive map will pop up, put your address in there, and the map will immediately indicate to you your property and the zone that it resides in, if any, because that's part of the nature of this change. First of all, districts remaining under or entering voluntary evacuation status. Pecan Grove Mud, Fort Bend Lid number 7, and Sienna Plantation Lid south of the Gulf Coast Water Authority Canal. Those three districts and those two districts in that portion of Sienna Lid are in voluntary evacuation. Portions of districts changing from mandatory to voluntary evacuation, Sienna Plantation Lid north of the Gulf Coast Water Authority Canal. Districts no longer under any evacuation order, and it's a list. Fort Bend Lid number 2, Fort Bend Lid number 6, Fort Bend Lid number 10, Fort Bend Lid number 11, Fort Bend Lid number 14, Fort Bend Lid number 15, Fort Bend Lid number 17, Fort Bend Mud number 121, Palmer Plantation Mud number 1, Palmer Plantation Mud number 2, First Colony Lid number 1, First Colony Lid number 2, Fort Bend Mud number 46, Fort Bend Mud number 49, Fort Bend Mud number 115. Those are no longer under any evacuation order. We've determined that the flood event is over for those districts. We have a portion of a district no longer under any evacuation order, and that is that portion of Fort Bend Lid number 19 north of Hagerson Road. We also have special conditions for a portion of Fort Bend Lid 19 and all of Fort Bend Lid number 20. And I will read it so you understand the nature of the change. The mandatory evacuations for Fort Bend Lid number 19 south of Hagerson Road and Fort Bend Lid number 20 shall remain in effect. However, ingress to and egress from Fort Bend Lid number 19 south of Hagerson Road and Fort Bend Lid number 20 and the movement of persons and occupancy of premises located within such areas shall be permitted, subject to the discretion of law enforcement personnel on location based on visible risk to health, safety, and welfare of the public. What that simply means is there's a lot of water out there, so it still remains a mandatory evacuation, but that water overnight is going to recede rather quickly, and we know roads are going to open up. Rather than waiting for the bureaucratic process to crank out these orders, I have authorized local law enforcement personnel to adjust these boundaries and just follow the water off the roads. They can move the barricades as the water leaves the roads, and they'll make the determination if it remains mandatory or goes to voluntary status. Once it goes to voluntary status, that area that they open up, you're free to come and go, but we want you to use caution because there may be high water in the ditches, et cetera, et cetera. We don't want anybody to get hurt. Now, in order to do this, it takes tremendous cooperation from our law enforcement personnel. And we've been in consultation with Sheriff Nels and his staff most of the afternoon to make sure this was carefully coordinated and all our officers was aware of this modification before I announced it here. Sheriff Nels says, I encourage residents to take precautions as they try to access their homes since some dangers still exist. If we let people into their neighborhoods, we want to be sure that everyone is safe. Please be patient with us. We know people are frustrated and that emotions are high, Please work with us to ensure there are no more casualties in this incident. And I couldn't agree with Sheriff Nels more. And with that, I want to say I tip my hat to all our law enforcement first responders and all those first responders and volunteers that came out to assist us during the worst of this rain and flood event. But now we're getting back home, and hopefully this modified order will let people get back into their property properly without waiting for the delays of getting these orders cranked out. But remember, stay safe. We can replace the property, but we can't replace you. Good night.